Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Foster Center presentation today. My name is Michael Gallagher. I'm the director of our Foster Center. And this is part 2 of our 3-part series, Keeping the Community Working. And today we have Don Watkins, an educator and author for opensource.com. And Don is going to share with us resources, especially free resources that are available out on the web. And I'm very grateful that he has come here today to share his experience and wealth of information. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Don Watkins. Thanks.
So I'm going to share my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Gallagher, for the introduction. I am Don Watkins. I am a retired public educator from Franklinville, New York. And I titled my presentation today, Reimagine Yourself, because that's how we're going to keep the community working. We have to reimagine roles that we thought were solid and have changed. And I always think that I have to reimagine and reinvent myself from time to time. So this is something that's not new to me. Now, at the bottom of the presentation, I've got a link to my LinkedIn profile. So if you want to connect at some point, feel free to do that. And we're going to talk a lot about free and open source resources on the web. Everything that's free is not open source, but everything that is open source is free. And the first thing that we need to talk about, of course, is how to get to the web. And those are browsers. Okay, my own personal favorite browser is Chrome. I do a lot of work with Google Drive and a lot of other Google things. So Chrome is my go-to browser. Doesn't really matter what platform I'm on, Windows, Mac, or Linux. Chrome is my browser of choice. But there is Firefox, which is an excellent browser. Firefox is an open source browser that comes from the Mozilla.org community. And it's a little bit more privacy conscious, a little bit more privacy oriented. We'll talk a little bit more about privacy a little bit later in the presentation. Safari is the Apple browser, which you primarily would use on a Mac and probably on an iPhone and an iPad. That comes with those platforms by default. Opera, which you may or may not be familiar with, is an excellent browser, an excellent choice as well. It's free, but it is an open source, but it is a free resource on the web. And the nice thing about Opera is that it comes with a VPN included in it. So if you're a person that needs VPN, that stands for virtual private networking, then Opera would be a great choice for you. And finally is Microsoft Edge, which Microsoft has reissued in the last year and a half. And Microsoft Edge has been rebuilt on top of Chromium, which is Google's open source project behind Chrome. So Edge and Chrome are really brother and sister these days. So that's what I would say about browser suggestions. Now, the first really cool resource that I want to make you aware of is GCF Learn Free. If you're not familiar with it, GCF comes from the Goodwill Community Foundation. We're all familiar with Goodwill boxes around our community, but perhaps you weren't aware of the incredible training resources that they have to offer. Everything from computers to career planning, applying for jobs, job search, money management, education and training, internet, email basics, etc. But one of the really cool things, especially if you're a person that uses Microsoft Office or wants to learn more about Microsoft Office, GCF Learn Free has over 200 videos that have just in time, 2 minute, 1 minute, minute and a half videos covering different things that you can do with all the different versions of Office, almost from its beginning with Office XP up through Office 2016. As a matter of fact, I think GCF Learn Free is probably a more extensive training than Microsoft themselves offers. Next is Office 365 training from Microsoft. This is the latest iteration of Microsoft Office, and it's primarily from the web, but you can also buy a standalone copy of Office 365 and install it on your Mac or Windows PC. And this is just a quick word. All of these links, all the things, all the resources I'm going to show you, I have compiled a website with all of them listed. And I'll make that available to you at the end of the presentation and through Dr. Gallagher and the Foster Center. So don't worry about trying to grab all of these things, write it all down, whatever. So Microsoft 365 includes, of course, training, templates, tips for Excel, Word, OneDrive, Outlook, PowerPoint, OneNote, SharePoint, and Microsoft's latest team collaboration software, Microsoft Teams. So if you're interested in any of those things, just go over to that website. It's free. I believe you might have to register with your email, but you won't have to pay Microsoft anything. Cybersecurity and why your password matters. Those examples up there, Hello Kitty 123 and 1357 Elm Street. When I was teaching kids 8 or 9 years ago, digital citizenship at Franklinville Central School, those are the kind of passwords that I recommended because they were fairly simple, but complex enough that we hoped that they weren't going to be easily guessed. But now that's no longer the case. So what is a good password? Well, once you've come up with a strong, memorable password, it's tempting to reuse it. I've done that myself. One of my original passwords years ago was Tempe, T-E-M-P. It was a city in Arizona that my sister lived in. I thought that was great. And then we began to be a little bit more concerned about cybersecurity maybe 10, 15 years ago. And I started using Latin phrases because I was an altar boy at one point. So I used things like Dominus Vobiscum and Et Cum Spiritu Tuo. But those are not even, and I used Seneca language words as well. But those are dictionary words and they can be detected by hackers pretty easily, actually. And then, of course, I used to use things that I could remember, like maybe I based my password on St. Bonaventure basketball or St. Bonaventure basketball stars or something like that. And then the temptation is to use those passwords over and over again on different websites. That's really not a good practice anymore. So at the bottom of the screen, that's a really good password, okay? And how do you remember that? And definitely not the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Although the New York Times found in an article that they published a few years ago, that was the most common password used by Americans. Don't use that. So how do you remember these passwords if they're more complex? Well, here's one of the free resources, Bitwarden. Bitwarden is an open source password manager, and it's available. It's free, completely free. You can download it and install it on Mac OS, Windows, Linux, Chrome, Firefox, Opera, Edge, Safari browsers as a browser plugin. And then if you have an Android phone, you can get it from the Google Play Store. And if you're on an iPhone like I have, you can get it from the Apple Store for iOS. Okay. And once you fire up the software, in order to create an account, you're going to need an email address. And you need to put in your name and choose a master password. That's something you're not going to forget, So and something you probably should write down somewhere else, okay? And then you need to retype your master password and then a master password hint, which you could use, okay? The beauty of Bitwarden is that Bitwarden can create passwords for you, just like the one on the left. That's a password that's not going to be easy to remember, but it's one that's going to be very difficult for a hacker to crack. So that's one of the advantages of using Bitwarden. On the right is just a typical login password. With Bitwarden, you can save login passwords, you can create secure notes and some other options as well. So I created a login for the Foster Center. This is entirely fictitious. Don't try to use this. And I created a user, Foster Center user 1, and then I created a password for that user. And as you can see, that's a pretty complex password. And then I can save that. Now I can save that. And the beauty of using Bitwarden is I can save this while I'm on the browser, when I'm shopping, maybe at Amazon.com or banking at my bank or making a car payment or whatever. and I enter all that information in on Chrome through the plugin, but if I have the app on my phone, I can access that information also through there. So that's the beauty of using Bitwarden, because all these passwords are stored in the cloud and they're secure. And if you lose your master password, guess what? You've lost all of your passwords. Now, Signal is something you may not be familiar with. Signal is an open source messaging platform. It's a secure messaging app. Many of us use text messaging on a regular basis. I know I do. We have children and grandchildren, and it's great to see them. But if you're going to pass sensitive information like maybe bank account numbers, and you got kids in college and you need to give them information that's of more secure nature, text messaging isn't the way to go. And there's a good reason for that. Text messages are stored on your phones indefinitely. And if your phone is stolen or lost, those messages can become a security nightmare. One of the secure options that is out there for people is WhatsApp. WhatsApp, if you're a Facebook user, then you have access to WhatsApp. But the problem with that is that it's not no one's really entirely sure that Facebook isn't looking at your data. So the beauty of Signal is an open source program that is not, it's funded entirely by donations. It's not owned by any particular corporation. And like Jack Dorsey says in his endorsement, he says he trusts Signal because it's well built, but more importantly, because of how it's built. Open source, peer reviewed, entirely funded by grants and donations. And the beauty of Signal is you can use Signal on the desktop if you're a Mac user, on the desktop if you're a Windows user, or on a Linux machine. But, and more importantly, how I typically use it is on my iPhone. I can send and receive text messages that are fully encrypted. I can exchange bank account information with other people. I can also record messages and send them to people that are in my address book as well. And all I really need is access to their telephone number. With that, I can invite them to become part of Signal, and we can begin to send secure messages back and forth. And you can also make encrypted telephone calls with Signal. So it's really a win-win-win. And it's open source and it won't cost you a dime. Now, the other thing I really like, one of my favorite parts of the presentation, is to talk about LibreOffice. I am a longtime LibreOffice user. As a matter of fact, when I graduated from St. Bonaventure 10 years ago, I was using OpenOffice, which was its predecessor. LibreOffice is a community-driven and developed software and is part of a nonprofit organization called the Document Foundation. If you are a person who has been using Microsoft Word, been using Microsoft Excel and or PowerPoint, you may not even think about it, but you really don't own your documents, because without Microsoft Word or without Excel or without PowerPoint, you can't open up those files unless you have LibreOffice. And that's the beauty of it. LibreOffice is entirely free. It's open source. You can download it and install it on Windows, Mac, Linux. You can open up those Excel files. You can open up those Word files. You can create files as well. You can reshare them. You can save them in the commonly accepted Microsoft Office current formats of DocX and XLSX and PPTX. And no one is any the wiser. It's just an incredibly great piece of software, and it's something that you ought to think about. And here's just an example of what it looks like. You can see Writer, which is what LibreOffice calls their the equivalent of Microsoft Word. And if you look at that, there really isn't a whole heck of a lot of difference between that and Microsoft Word. They're very similar. It reminds me a lot of Word, maybe Word 2003 and 2007, okay? And on the right, you can see Calc, which is the spreadsheet. I feel it's equivalent to Excel. Maybe some would quibble with that, but that's free. That's fine. That's for them. to quibble. I didn't show Impress, but Impress is the equivalent of PowerPoint. It has all the same tools that you would get in PowerPoint. And you can freely exchange anything you create in Writer, Calc, and Impress with Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. The next free tool, and one that I use frequently, is Google Drive. Google Drive has been around probably since about 2006 or 7 is when I started using it. Back then it was called Google Docs. It's a word processor, spreadsheet, presentation tool, and also you can create forms. So if you have community activities that you're involved in, maybe the Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, church activities, you can create forms and you can solicit interaction with your community. You don't have to pay any money. It's all you need to access Google Drive is to have a Gmail account, which is pretty easy. All you got to do is go to mail.google.com. And if you don't already have a Gmail account, you can set one up for free. Now, what's beautiful about Google Drive is any documents you create, no matter where you are in the creation process, if you suddenly lose power, your computer dies, you lose your connection to the internet, your work is automatically saved. That's incredible. You can share documents with other people. You can work on documents collaboratively. I've never seen anything before or since it's like that. I do that on a regular basis with a number of people. The forms are easy to use. They have lots of templates out there. You don't have to start from scratch. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. And also, if you want to download documents, you can download documents in Microsoft Word format or in Microsoft Excel format or in Microsoft PowerPoint format. And you can email those to your friends who may be using Microsoft products. No problems at all. And again, this is another product I used when I was going to St. Bonaventure. It's incredibly useful. One thing I was going to mention, this presentation that you're viewing was created using Google Drive. Okay, it exists on the web. And here's just an example of what it looks like. It's a really simple word processor, very, very simple. I like that. I like simplicity myself. And to the upper right, you can see an example of the spreadsheet, and to the lower right, you can see an example of the typical form that you might create with Google Drive. Great resource. Now, here's something you may not be aware of, and this is really tremendous. This is called Ninite. The web address is ninite.com, and this is all free software for Microsoft Windows. So if you're a Mac user, this is not going to be helpful for you. Or if you're using Linux, this won't be particularly helpful for you. But all of these executables are up in the cloud and you can download them. And as you can see, you've got web browsing, the browsers we talked about, Chrome, Opera, Firefox, and Edge, except Safari, of course, which that doesn't run on Windows. So they're there. You can, in terms of messaging, you've got Zoom. Well, we're on Zoom right now. If you want to set up your own Zoom account, you can just click that check mark, and at the bottom of the page, you'll see a button that will say install. You can download LibreOffice from this particular place. You can download iTunes. You can download VLC, which is an open source video player. You can download Spotify. I'm a Spotify user. I love to listen to Spotify. There's all sorts of imaging software, and all you have to do is check the ones you want, click install, and depending on the speed of your internet connection and depending on the speed of your computer, they will all eventually install and you'll be happy. And it's free. Now, I don't know, now that you got a little extra time, maybe you're rethinking what you're going to do with your life. Maybe you're tired of the sending letters to the local editor and not having them be published. Well, you don't have to ask their permission anymore. You can start blogging. And if you've got a Gmail account, probably the natural place for you to start is what I listed, number 3, Blogger. Blogger is part of Google's cloud offering. Okay, and it's really easy. Here in the middle, I have a typical getting started first screen from Blogger. And you can get started blogging, express yourself, writing. And that's what I did. I had a life-changing event occurred in 2005. And I thought, I'm going to start writing down some of the things that I think are important. And I started doing that. And then I got encouragement. Other bloggers said to me, I really like the things you're saying. I think you should write more. Or I like your writing. And that really began what today I do actually participate in an open source community, opensource.com, where I regularly contribute as a writer. But that all started with blogging. Now, my own particular favorite is WordPress. WordPress.com is a website where you can set up a free blog. And the reason why I like WordPress.com and WordPress is that WordPress is mobile friendly. So if I want to share content with my children who have iPhones, or with other people who have Chromebooks, or if you're on a Android phone or whatever browser, it's going to show up okay. It's going to be fine because it's mobile friendly. I've never used Wix per se. I've looked at it. And I do have a Medium account. Medium is a little bit more serious. I know a number of people, all you who have Medium accounts, I have a Medium account, but I primarily have never blogged on it. I just read what other people have written. And I have a Tumblr account. But I really didn't like Tumblr as well. But those are just there are some other ones out there that you might take a look at. But those are my top 5. And that'll get you started. Now, maybe blogging isn't for you, but maybe you always wanted to write a book. And back in the old days, that used to be a pretty expensive operation. My wife wrote a textbook, and then she went to a publishing house, and she got it copyrighted, and it was going to cost her about $3,000 to $4,000 to produce. I forget, it was like 300 or 400 books, or maybe it was 100 books. And we just didn't have that kind of extra change at the time. But nowadays, that's no longer necessary. If you've got the content, there are places, and my personal favorite is lulu.com. You can create books. I actually helped a group of students about a dozen years ago create an ebook on Lulu. They created the content. I did the technical side of it. I also helped my wife about 8 years ago produce a book with content written by a couple of students in her classroom at Franklinville. And the cost of the book was around maybe $15 or something like that, because we only produced a few of them. And but the cost of publication, that was it. We had no other cost. That's what it exactly cost. Down in the lower portion of the screen is a book that I was technical contact on for Karen Zale, who is a area author who retold the story of her father's capture and by the Japanese in the Philippines during World War II, his survival of the Bataan Death March, and his survival as a Japanese prisoner of war in World War II. Karen did all of her work in Word. The templates for the book were downloaded for free from Lulu. All we had to do was copy and paste into the templates, and then we had to do some other resizing and editing. And we uploaded all of that, and the book was published. I think her publishing cost for a 5x9 book, which you now can buy on Amazon, by the way, her publishing cost was around $4 per book. The beauty of using Lulu is you only produce as many books as you sell. You're not bound to have a minimum order of 100 or 10 or even 5, just one at a time if you so choose. Your cost, in her case, was around $4 to $5 a book. Karen sells these to benefit Western New York Heroes Foundation, which is a group that supports veterans. So she sells them for $14.99. So for every book she sells, she sends about $10 to the veterans. So that's an example of what you can do with self-publishing, and those are resources on the web. The other one that you should be aware of is Kindle Direct. Kindle Direct is offered by Amazon, and it has many of the same nuances, or many of the same features, I should say, that Lulu has. The only difference is that with Lulu, you can sell in any marketplace. You can sell on Lulu, you can sell on Amazon, you can sell through the Apple iBook store, the Apple Bookstore, or you can sell through Barnes & Noble. whereas Kindle Direct is strictly Amazon stuff. So that's a difference there. Now you're looking for graphics to put in these books. You just can't go do a Google search and grab whatever you like off the web and say, hey, I like this particular image. Because eventually it's going to catch up with you and say, hey, that's mine. And that's protected by copyright. So you're looking for free graphics. This is a great place, openclipart.org. You can search clipart. I just searched for Wi-Fi there in a group meeting and hamburgers. But I frequently use OpenClipart to create holiday greeting cards, birthday cards, and any other thing. Now, because it's public domain, you don't have to attribute where you got it from, although I frequently have given them credit. But you don't have to, it's not required. So OpenClipart is a great place to go for free graphics for your publications, whether it's your blog or whether you're writing a book. Now there's another option. These images are copyrighted and they're covered under what's called Creative Commons license. These are Creative Commons images. And to find these, you go, and again, these links are in the link farm that I'm going to share with Dr. Gallagher. Search.creativecommons.org. And I typed in Olean. And these are a couple images that came up. So we got a picture of North Union on the left and a picture of I-86 going, it looks like they're coming in from the west and you're going to get off at St. Bonaventure. You can use these images. They're copyrighted, okay? Creative Commons is not a way around copyright. It's an extension of copyright. And the licenses here are licensed by attribution. So if I use this image, I have to give credit to Olean, New York by Random Retail, okay? That thing that I pasted in there shows that I'm entitled to use his image as long as I give him or her credit for that particular image. And the same is true with the image to the right, Exit to St. Bonaventure University by Ken Lund. Ken has said I can use his image as long as I give him credit. And this way, you don't have to call up and ask permission, which might be more difficult. How are the images displayed and attributed? Well, here's an example. Let's say I chose that particular image on I-86. I want to use that. I just click on that highlights, and it brings up this license information. And it says the image was marked with a CC by SA, which is Share Alike 2.0 license. Credit the creator, share adaptations under the same terms. So if I make any changes to Ken's photo, maybe I put a big red arrow pointing at that exit sign, I have to reshare that photo with a CC by SA 2.0. You get it? It's a share alike. It's the same thing. I have to reshare it under the same license. And the way that you credit the creator, you can do that. And you notice there's a tab for rich text. So you can just copy and paste that as a rich text. That's rich text will fit in anything like Microsoft Word or LibreOffice Writer. Okay. HTML, if you're going to put it on your web page, it's already got the correct formatting for HTML. So you can just paste that into your WordPress or Blogger website. Or if you just want to do plain text, you're going to put this in a book and you want to put it in a Microsoft Office thing for Lulu.com or Kindle Direct Publishing. And then this is just a quick primer about open licensing. I don't want to get too involved because it's pretty complex, but basically it's an extension of copyright. And there's lots of information out there about it. There are attribution by, okay, that's the least, it's not public domain. I have to let you know who created the image. And then there's share alike. If I share the image, you have to share it with the same license. You're not allowed to change the license. Then there's attribution, no derivatives. It's a little bit more restrictive. You can share the image, but you're not allowed to modify it in any way. Then there's attribution, non-commercial. That means you can share it in your church, the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, but don't share it from your business, okay? That's pretty simple, right? Then there's attribution, non-commercial, share alike. That's, you kind of get the picture on this. And then the one that's the most restrictive is attribution, non-commercial, no derivatives, okay? So it'd be okay to share that in a church group or with the Boy Scouts, but stay away from any businesses and certainly don't make any changes. Now, some other things that you might not be aware of or maybe haven't thought of. Maybe you're interested in podcasting. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I really enjoy them. I get a lot of information that way. And podcasts are really content that's recorded. In the old days, we used to use tape, but nobody uses tape anymore. They're all digital recordings, and typically they're MP3 format. One of the easy ways to do that. Now you can do a little bit of podcasting. Most of our phones, I have an iPhone. I could record some audio, depending on how much memory I got. Or you can do that with an Android phone as well. But Audacity is one of my personal favorites. Audacity, again, and you can install Audacity from that Ninite site that I showed you. Audacity is a 16-track audio editor. Okay, so you could put the trombones on track 1, the drums on track 2, and recite your favorite poem on track 3. Okay, it has special effects. You can save it either in an OGG, which is an open source format, or you can save it in a proprietary MP3 format, which is probably more common. Another one is Open Broadcaster software. Open Broadcaster, this is a little demonstration of Open Broadcaster on the right. Open Broadcaster is currently used by a lot of people who are broadcasting themselves, who they're not just doing a recording, they're actually, as you were, creating their own show on the web. And you can do that easy enough with Open Broadcaster software. Open Broadcaster has excellent documentation. If you want to learn more about it, I suggest you go to the web. If you, I can give you some, but I didn't include it in this presentation. But with Open Broadcaster, you can broadcast to Facebook. You can broadcast, you can have an interview with one of your friends and broadcast it to Facebook or YouTube. You can put it on Twitch. You're really in control. Or you can save the files locally as what's called a Matroska format or an MP4 format, and then put them on a USB drive or whatever, okay? And then the final thing I want you to make, if you have a Gmail account, a Google account, you can use YouTube Studio, which is kind of cool software in itself. It's all in Google's cloud. Video conferencing applications, these are great. Obviously, we're using one today. And I have a Zoom account, and St. Bonaventure University has a Zoom account. You can get a free Zoom account. What you can do with it is somewhat limited, but it's free. Okay, and it's something that maybe if you're interested, you can do that. You can. Last year when we were locked down, we were using Zoom to communicate with our kids, in addition to our children and grandchildren, in addition to FaceTime. Google Meet is another one. If you already have a Google account, that's easy enough to use. That seems to be pretty robust. I don't know if there are any particular limitations on Google Meet. There may be the number of people. I know on the free version of Zoom, you're limited to the number of participants. Jitsi is an open source application, which is web-based. You can use it from any browser. You can use it from any smartphone. And it has no limitations that I'm aware of. So you can have any number of people. You can do screen sharing like we're doing right now, or can actually blur your background. So if you're presenting from your bedroom or presenting from someplace that you don't want everybody to see what's in the background, that's another neat feature of Jitsi. And you can also stream to YouTube like you can with Zoom. Now here's something that a lot of people are interested in, ad blocking. I don't know how often you are on the web, but I'm on the web almost every day reading articles, blogs, and whatever. And all those pop-up ads get to be really annoying, or all the ads, period, are quite annoying. So one of the things that I use is uBlock Origin. It is a plugin for Chrome. It's a plugin for Firefox. And I believe it's a plugin for Safari and Edge as well. It's completely free. I believe uBlock Origin is open source on top of that. And no more ads. Now what will happen is when you get to sites where ad generates their revenue, they're going to maybe say, you can't view our site, or if you want to view our site, you have to disable your ad blocker. And that's entirely up to you whether you want to do that. You can, of course, and I frequently do, because maybe I'm buying a computer from Dell, and Dell will say, you have to disable your ad blocker. Okay. Privacy Badger is something I recently learned about. Privacy Badger is to limit the amount of tracking cookies that track where you are. Because when you go on the web, people, businesses track where you go because they want to sell you stuff. And that makes sense, of course. But if you don't want that, you can use Privacy Badger, which is released by the Electronic Frontier Foundation. That's what EFF at the top of the page stands for. EFF is kind of almost like the ACLU in some ways of the web. Okay, and then DuckDuckGo is a search engine which doesn't track you. So if you're always searching for chocolate cookies like I do, or chocolate brownies, you're going to get ads from bakeries and from different places. They're going to try to sell. They're going to try to target you with advertising. With DuckDuckGo, I don't have to worry about that. They're not tracking me. So that's a search engine that's more privacy oriented than, say, Google or Yahoo or any of the other search engines that you might be using. Now we get to the part that I really enjoy. This is something that I really have used a lot, and that's open educational resources. So you are trying to retool yourself, reimagine yourself. Maybe there's some skills you need to pick up on. Maybe you didn't take algebra in high school. Maybe you didn't take algebra in college, but you want to now. Maybe you didn't take Python. You don't know what Python is, a computer programming language. Maybe there's some other things that you want to learn, but you don't have the money that you had a few years ago or a few months ago or whatever. So open educational resources are teaching, learning, and research materials that are either in the public domain or licensed in a manner that provides everyone with free and perpetual permission to engage in the 5 R's, which are listed below: retain, reuse, revise, remix, and redistribute. Now, I know as a former teacher that you get materials to use in your classroom. You can't legally make copies of all of that stuff because you could get in trouble. You're violating the copyright. You can't buy one book and make copies for everybody else. But with open educational resources, that's entirely possible. Complete books, peer-reviewed books, are published more and more by professors, and in some cases, students and professors, for a variety of different topics. And I'm going to begin to show you some of those resources that are available on the web. One of them is Saylor Academy. Saylor is a nonprofit started in 2008 that offers free and open online courses to all who want to learn. They offer nearly 100 full-length courses at the college and professional levels. They're all developed by subject matter experts. All the courses are available, complete at your pace, and free of cost. Not all institutions of higher learning will allow you to get credit that way, but there are some. Empire State College in New York, Excelsior College, and Catholic University of America, which I don't really know where that is, but I know I'm an alumni of Excelsior. So there's a way to maybe help you out, or maybe you just want to find out more about a particular subject and don't get any credit for it. It's entirely up to you. So take a look at Saylor.org. And again, that's in the links that I'm going to provide at the end of the talk. Khan Academy. Khan Academy is an incredible resource. It's been around for at least a dozen years. It was started by Solomon Khan, and they cover everything from pre-K all the way up through graduate and professional studies. It's high quality in many. There's AP calculus, there's SAT preparation, almost anything you could imagine is offered through Khan. And you can see on the left, I took a screenshot of Hour of Code. On the right-hand side, there's some computer code. And on the left-hand side, there are a series of activities that take you through learning that particular code. It's entirely free. All the videos are on YouTube, but the nice part is you don't have to go out and find those videos. It's all right there for you to use. And it's free to join Khan Academy. You can join as a teacher, you can join as a parent, you can join as a student. The only thing that you'll get a solicitation from them from time to time for a donation. You don't have to donate, but you can, and I have. OER Commons is a clearinghouse of information about open educational resources. You can search by keyword, you can search by subject, you can search by education level, and they're aligned with all the common, it's called Common Core, but all the federal and state standards. So you can search for that. And when you get the list of the courses, it'll tell you what format they're in and what particular license they have. Maybe they have a more restrictive license, or maybe they have a more liberal Creative Commons license, okay? The other thing, I love Open Culture. Open Culture is just incredible. It's they have links to free books, free courses, you name it. It's like a clearinghouse of information of everything that's open in terms of culture, in terms of education and the arts. So definitely check out openculture.com. OpenStax they are free and flexible textbooks, okay? They're developed, these are all peer-reviewed texts from Rice University in Texas. And you can see the table of contents. You can see on the left there, you can see the table of contents. You can view the actual textbook online. You can download the textbook as a PDF. You can download it to your smartphone, or you can order a print copy. Print copy is going to cost you some money, probably for the publication of the book, the printing of the book, and probably the mailing. But they have an incredible number of free resources available for you. And college algebra just scratches the surface of what they offer. There's MIT OpenCourseWare. That's been around for quite a while. All of the undergraduate and graduate courseware that MIT currently offers is available on the web for you to examine and take the course if you want to. Smithsonian Learning Lab. This is something that I just learned when I was putting this presentation together, but I imagine it's very rich. It's all digital resources from the nine museums of the Smithsonian Institution. And so you can share these as well. I believe they're pretty well openly licensed. So a great resource. Wikimedia, one of my favorites. They believe all education should be free. Now, if that was the case, we wouldn't be able to be here at wonderful institutions like St. Bonaventure University. But Wikimedia is one of those places. Most people are familiar with Wikipedia, which is my favorite encyclopedia, by the way. But many people are not aware of WikiQuote, WikiBooks, Wikidata. Wikidata, I know, has been used I don't know how it's figuring in with COVID-19, but I know data from Wikidata was used to defeat Ebola. Okay, so there's a lot of different resources from Wikimedia, and you ought to check it out. You owe it to yourself. And you can also get sounds. If you want to have some fun with Audacity, you can download sounds of whales, which I used to do with my students. Download sounds of whales and other animals, and I used to let the kids experiment with what the whales sounded like on reverb. It was interesting. Creative Commons. CreativeCommons.org has their own website. 2 billion works and counting. And that includes literary works, videos, photos, audio, open education, scientific research, and more. So you really owe it to yourself to go over there. They also have a Creative Commons Global Summit, which is once a year, and it's really worthwhile. Last year, I participated. It was free. Really interesting presentations. Project Gutenberg, 60,000 titles. 60,000. Just think of that. 60,000 free ebooks. No, they're not on the New York Times bestseller list, but maybe you wanted to look at the poetry of Robert Frost, who's one of my favorite poets. You can download that. You can download it in EPUB format. So EPUB is viewable on an iPad or an iPhone. It's viewable with Kindle. You can download it. You can read it on the web, HTML. You can download it as a text file if you want to. All these things are provided through. They're all in the public domain. And they've all been proofread to make sure that they're accurate. So books that are out of print. Code Academy, if you always wanted to learn how to code, but were afraid to ask, that's a bad pun. Anyways, if you always want to learn how to code, Code Academy is a great place to start. You can do HTML, CSS, Python, JavaScript, all the popular programming languages. Now, eventually, there is a point where you begin to pay, but I learned quite a bit of Python just by going to Code Academy just to get started. Oh, I want to make sure to include this, disposing of old computers. Okay, make sure that when you throw your computer out, you just don't put it in the trash. Make sure you don't put it in the landfill without having it properly disposed of, because information on your computer, maybe it's your social security number, maybe you maybe you did tax returns on your computer. Formatting the drive is not enough. Cyber criminals can unformat drive. They've got forensic software that allow them to do that, and they can steal your information. So the best thing that I would recommend, at least locally, is to take your materials to Staples right here in Olean. You can take them up to Staples. Staples has a program to properly dispose of iPhones, Androids, old computers, anything electronic. I have a little, these are all, I just took a screenshot of all the items that are accepted for free recycling. And there's a link also to the CISA.gov. That's a cybersecurity infrastructure website of the United States government. I think it's under the Department of Homeland Security, but it's really a great resource. They have loads and loads of great information about properly disposing of computers, and also cybersecurity information as well. Now, I just want to throw this in because you've been watching this presentation on a computer that runs Linux. My computer doesn't run Windows, it doesn't run Mac OS, it runs Linux, which is a kernel which was developed actually, was released in September of 1991. So in a couple of days, it's going to be 30 years old. Linux is full. There are 600 Linux distributions, 500 under current development. And the one I happen to be using is Linux Mint, okay? But I listed some other ones that I'm familiar with and have used: Ubuntu, Pop! OS, and Fedora. Fedora is produced by Red Hat. And the reason why I mention this is these open source operating systems are chock full of free software. Open source operating systems typically, like Linux, typically come with LibreOffice. So that once you install the operating system, you've got a lot of tools already. They come with Firefox. They come with all kinds of free tools, and then all kinds of free tools that you can download for free, okay? And you can give it away. You can't give Microsoft Windows away. You'd be in serious trouble. You can't give Mac OS away. You'll be in serious trouble eventually. And here's some open source resources. A little shameless plug for opensource.com at the top. Every day of the week, 7 days a week, there are new articles about open source in the enterprise, open source, more tips and tricks for how to use LibreOffice, for example. That's one of my upcoming articles. But there's lots of excellent content from other people. Another person I would recommend, if you're on Twitter, follow Phil Shapiro. He's a friend of mine. Phil is always sharing free and open source resources. Again, there's openculture.com. That's a place I would highly recommend that you go. The Free Software Foundation, if you want to find out a little bit more about free software and what there is to know about free software, that is a great place to go and read and get more information. And the Open Education Consortium is another place where you're going to find out more about open education and open education resources. If you want to, you can follow me on Twitter. I share at least 2 or sometimes 3 or more open source resources every day. So you can do that by following me or following the people that I follow. And then the links referenced in this presentation, that's included below. So I'm on GitHub, github.com/Don Watkins. If you just get there, you'll eventually find a link for presentations, and you'll see the one that's labeled fostercenter.md. That's Foster Center in Markdown. So I just want to say thank you. That's a graphic that I created with Inkscape, which is open source software. This presentation was created with open source tools and Google Drive. And as you can see, I've licensed it under Creative Commons. It's copyright 2021 by me, licensed CC by SA 4.0. So thank you very much. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Now I'd like to ask a question. What might you say to someone who is concerned about the security of open source software?
Well, I would just reference the people that use open source software, in particular, the federal government, the New York Stock Exchange, the London Stock Exchange, I believe the Tokyo Stock Exchange, all run on Red Hat Linux, which is open source. The beauty of open source is you got more eyeballs on the code. You have a proprietary systems, proprietary software, you're going to have less eyeballs on the code. So it's harder to find bugs. It's harder to fix bugs because you don't have a community of basically volunteers helping you out. But almost all of the federal websites, the whitehouse.gov, libraryofcongress.gov, New York State government, almost all of those websites are running on Linux servers, running either Nginx or Apache, which are open source web serving engines. I see there's 3 questions in the chat. Oh, thank you. Great information. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, cool. So, and probably a good place to go is, that's a great question, because you get that a lot. There's a misconception sometimes that open source is less safe, but that's not been my experience. As long as the system is properly patched. I get regular updates for Linux Mint, and I know all the other major distributions regularly update their software. And you can have problems on proprietary systems. Right now, there's a heightened security for iOS. I forget the exact name of the vulnerability, but it's just been in the news the last couple of days.
And Don, thank you so much for coming today. I can't thank you enough. It's just been terrific.
No, thank you. It's been fun.
And thank you all for coming.
Have a good day.